Hello people, today I thought I'd investigate how I started to retrieve my memories and how the mind worked around that from the time I was very young. I always kept little snippets of memories. Bits and pieces seemed quite irrelevant, but they always stayed with me, and when I was about 14 I remember distinctly, because my memory actually is very good. I was in a geography class and I had this Christian teacher who looked straight at me and started talking about Stockholm syndrome, and that fascinated me on some level, deeper than it probably should have, but for a good reason. And I didn't think about that again, being in the situation I was in, but in hindsight that was exactly what it was that I was experiencing. So Stockholm syndrome is basically walking amnesia. When people are traumatized to a point where they'll lean towards their oppressor and defend their oppressor and make sure that they don't get upset, so that they don't get upset. And so anyway, long story short, I was suffering really bad PTSD at that point. My nervous system was breaking down, and I went to South America to see the shamans and take plant medicine, which was excellent, and I had a lot of good experiences there. I won't go into it too much, but it was one of the only ways that I was going to get back into this state that I was locked out of. And once again, I find that it's quite similar to the amnesic state, but with the potential to work and change things within that environment in a similar mind space for me. And having said that, the medicine was very kind to me. I didn't really have many rough times, and I believe that's because I'd been doing my work before that. I came back to Australia and had another year of my life taken through a spurious DVO charge, which was the end of my relationship with my children. And that's when I started to do my stretching and stuff, and at that point I realised that I couldn't keep pushing my body, because I'd stopped working and I was pretty keen to stay fit, and I'd always been fit. I'd worked on my body all my life, with my body, just not in it, and body needed a rest, so I took ease. I decided to stop, which was very difficult, because I needed to hear myself again properly. And during these times I got into more deep meditation and the odd use of psychedelics, mushrooms, and funnily enough, I started to see and feel parts of my body which had been right in front of me all my life, that I had no register to whatsoever. And first one was finding about a 5-inch fracture in my skull, and that was in 2019. And that was interesting because I was just fully conscious of being unconscious of that having ever been there, but it was obviously time for my subconscious to show me these things. Also, would have been early 2000s, I was doing a psychology course, and at the end of the course I broke out in emotion, saying that I'd been sexually abused. It's a really difficult one to land when you're having a sudden moment and there's all the guilt and fear of imagination and fear of reprisal and fear of illegitimately accusing someone. So that got pushed down for a number of years. But yeah, so my next mission after freeing myself from the illegalities and finally, hopefully, having some time to recalibrate, I stopped heavy exercising to a great degree, and I was surfing a bit, and then I had a great fear of water again all of a sudden, and I paid attention to that one and went, right, okay, well, I'll be gentle with that. So I pulled up on the surfing, and I was making myself walk up the beach, breathing really deeply and as if I was exerting myself, but walking really slowly, trying to confuse my body-mind into, or reconfusing it into some sort of connection, and started to drop a lot of weight, and my life force was very low. Didn't have much energy for much at all, really, and I had to have empathy for that too as part of the stopping, because it was the going that caused the problems in the first place, on top of unprocessed stuff. So yeah, more recently I've caught myself looking in the mirror as I've dropped a bit more weight and got a bit older, and the muscle isn't where it used to be, and I'm starting to notice other bone disfigurations that I would have received very early. I've had my breastplate's been snapped, and I've had a lump out the front of my chest, which I only really recognised 2 years ago, and as I've lost weight I've realised that there's top rib broken as well. And through my forensics I recognised that this can't happen to a young child in a house of 3 other children and 2 parents without everybody knowing. So then I understand the drop-ins from the doctor friend, and I start to understand how this has been a cover-up for a long time, and would also lead to my having dissociated and left, and also formed a allegiance to the tyranny by fear of deletion, basically, early on. And with that I'm starting to remember all of the feelings that I had, all of the misplaced feelings, which are actually well placed in hindsight, knowing that I've been certain places under amnesia and I have the memories, and with certain people, and this is the way it works when you're doing this sort of work. It's quite mythical, actually. I had a memory of being in a town that I'm in now, actually, having been dropped off to a surfboard shaper in this holiday town that we used to come to with my family. Parents dropped me off, and I was at the pub that I drink at now, and I now know why I was drinking there. I was drugged and sex trafficked from that pub that night, and in a number of other places which have shown themselves to me through pictures and things like that. I took my family album when I left home, and I'm really glad I did, because now I get to see the face I had back then when I couldn't see myself. And just amazing how the mind has the ability to delete anything that is too big for the organism to process at that time. And I always used to, when I was growing up, especially with my next brother up, who was extremely sadistic amongst other things, I said, never the head, mate, never the head. And he spent my whole childhood wrapping me over the crown chakra with his knuckles and doing all sorts of rubbish to me. We won't go into that, but that's just the start. Thanks, Jeremy. And not the head, because I had still the subliminal understanding of I'm either going to go into amnesia or I'm going to become psychotic to try and save myself. And that's been an issue for me a lot of my life. The fear of losing consciousness, again in a situation of great stress. Not that it's happened for me, but in situations now of connection it will happen at times, and I don't know whether that's a warning signal or just the mechanism of people getting in behind my security, which I've had to have very tight for a long time. Yeah, so finding these bits, and also then remembering the stories that were told, which were very doctored, in the sense that other people were thrown into stories where it was actually me, and all the pity went to them, and that dissociated me from my experience, even subliminally, because it's second tier suppression purposefully. So I've remembered a lot of stories, and I suppose, to be quite honest with you, I've understood that I grew up just under a huge gaslight. My life has been sort of like a cross between the Bourne Identity and the Truman Show. As I've found that, and as I've acknowledged over time, that as I started to remember, and these people who understood what they'd done and were observing me starting to retrieve and start to grow my personality and my courage back, that was when the fun really began. That was the start of the real war. And I realised in the end that all of this purposeful trauma all this time was to suppress these emotions and these memories to prevent them from being exposed. And I've had to go through a fair bit of re-traumatisation through this. There's had to be a bit of courage in going into a couple of faulty relationships since my faulty marriage, because I can't change a pattern that I can't feel. And if I can't be present in that situation as it's happening, then I am either not going to move forward, or I'm going to have to evolve on the spot. So that was very challenging and very tiring to remain conscious as I was watching my body-mind response reactions consciously, while at the same time knowing that I was losing consciousness by the mechanism that was imparted on me at a very young age and forward from that point. I also found that due to the history that I'd had, I was aware that I'd basically built a fair few facades around hiding this, and well, combined with the fact that authenticity was almost illegal, because that authenticity is getting close to remembering, if it can be understood this way. So yeah, I built a lot of social masks, and during this time I was patently aware of not wanting to feed these masks, though I was very lonely, and the silence gets very loud when one's been in a war and the war stopped, but the war's still going on inside. Not that it had really stopped, there was still other activities of stalking and theft and other stuff going on, so it wasn't a free ride by any stretch into healing. And also recognizing that these attacks were specifically designed not only to take away my capacity to move forward, but to take my headspace back into combat, which is exactly what I was negating within myself, having known that this was the mechanism they created in me in the first place, combined with the Stockholm stuff, which would leave me in a fawning mechanism, basically pleading to my oppressor because I knew they wouldn't relent. So yes, and during this time too, I found that in the environment I was dragging a similar energy as I was changing, but I was more capable of being observant and responsive to the sensations within me, and also to be present rather than dissociating when I was becoming aware of dissent. And funny thing about this amnesia is that, as I've said before, I can seem quite naive, and I'm also not an aggressive person by nature. But when I've had the amnesia and I'm becoming cognizant of the fact that someone's trying to pull one on me, I can flip, not in a nasty way, but in a very cohesive way, in a very penetrating way, to end what I'm seeing emerging in front of me. And these people who think that it's so easy become a little shocked by the change, and so they should be, because that's my little child inside just praying and hoping that this isn't the case once more. And if it is, then that part that was amnesic is now going to come out and rectify, because what I've actually done and been doing in recognition is retrieving my inner child from a life that he never had. And I'm trying to remember feelings, remember feelings that I've not experienced. So to engender what's in the future is hard to imagine. But also with that, in a converse way, I've learnt that all this pushing, trauma, pushing, no trust. When you've been disconnected from the spirit, you feel like you have to make everything yourself, because you were never taught ease and grace and flow. So everything becomes about 4 times harder, because you're not trusting, you're mechanical, linear and logical, and this is where the magic gets taken away and the life force gets taken away. And another thing I'll say about all this too is, in amongst it, I was patently unaware of how much misfortune these people bring into your life. As I was born to them and lived under them and grew under them and then worked for them because I was too broken to come out into the world. Convenient, isn't it? Lost it. Hard things to talk about. I just lived a lie. My life had been a lie. And hang on a sec, 2 secs. That's right. The luck, the health, the accidents, the misfortunes, the unfortunacies are not unfortunacies. It's a spiritual situation where psychology is just the beginning, and as the target loses sentience, they start to believe once again that all this is because of them, with a little bit of help, because that takes the emphasis from the provider of the experience to the target. And as I say, the target will then take over the job of denying one's own reality for the sake of total confusion. And situation I'm left with now is to regain my authenticity in society, and to, on the flip side, allow myself to feel good about who and what I attract, and also to know that it doesn't matter either way because I've got this. And also in my own learning and understanding, learning how sensitive one has to be to others who've experienced this stuff, minus, because I have another generation of children who've been through this, not just my personal children. And it's a very sensitive game to start to expose this sort of stuff without causing a lot of damage, and at the same time not exposing it is a lifetime of damage. So I'm using myself as a example for how I would have treated my child, both of them, and my own inner child, had I had the chance of assisting consciousness to find itself again through these situations, through the right support and love, and the understanding of the mechanisms and responses that have been put in place subliminally to protect not only the child's psyche but the greater problem behind it, which is the locked terror in the child, and then the allegiance by hypnotic effect of fear and very convincing story. And yeah, so it's been quite a wild journey of walking the path that appears in front of you, and remembering trust again, and understanding that this whole mechanism is built to take that inner voice away, and that was the protector and the helper, and you can call it God if you want, you can call it whatever you want, but it is our spiritual connection. And when that's broken, and it's only a soft voice, then this one takes over, and life becomes linear and Lego-like, and the opportunity to be fascinated disappears because it's all drudgery. And so what I basically had to do is to apply the fascination to my greatest fear, and to the patterns that kept me locked in, and to how I was made allergic to real connection through the inversion of false connection, and how that's impacted my understanding of the suppleness of humanity. And these are all things I have to be responsible for, because I know it's not this way, though I have been caught in a paradigm where it has been this way. So it's takes a fair bit of convincing on this level, and as I said, the stopping can make it louder at times, because one gets to experience the fullness of the emotions that were bypassed in the moving, in the having to keep going. And that's why time's so important. And why being able to sit with yourself and listen to yourself is paramount these days in a world of opportunities not to. And you know, since I was a little kid, even though I never knew what this was, I knew that it was robbing me of my gifts. And that doesn't mean that any of my gifts have disappeared, and I can honestly say there's been a few times in my life under this type of stress where I've felt my brain changing, not for the better, but once again, maybe that was necessary for me to get to the point where I got to the bottom of the bucket and actually started to retrieve things that were beneficial to completing the loop and to understanding that beyond all the material, I was terrified. And the fear of fear is the doorway to amnesia, be it full-blown or momentary, or yeah, that's the conclusion I came to in what happens when someone can't find an answer to a feeling that is omnipresent and never diagnosed. And with this, I'll also say that after the years of psychology I've done, going round and round in my head, in the limited material I had, which was still plenty, but it wasn't as deep as this, re-traumatizing myself, an hour a week paying for it, to know that they can't tell me anything I don't already know myself. I've studied myself for 50 years. I know I'm not good with help, but what I'm really not good with is asking for help and not receiving it. That's a big one. And it was all locked in my body anyway, because the genesis of this issue was before I had consciousness, so of course it's going to go to the body, and afterwards as well, because that conduit's been opened. So yes, remembering, embodiment. It's a long walk home, and that old story of the longest journey you'll ever make from your head to your heart is very true. And that was only a concept for me because I didn't really know what my body was. That was a thought, head to heart. And that doesn't mean that I lost any of my empathy. It just meant that I was porous. I was overly empathetic and irresponsive to abuse, basically. I just had a cut out because I'd seen so much of it so early that in the end my mind reverted back to the terror and the potentials of what may happen if I may protect myself, and with now the scars and also the memories of exactly why. So yeah, re-traumatization. Yeah, there's a lot of the unconscious trying to pull up what's been caught so that it can be processed. And as I found, as much as I'd really worked hard to learn about this stuff with the material I was afforded, it's all in the body. And the emanations of the body, which are the emotions, drive the head, which are the thoughts. And we can't fix a thought with a feeling. Can't fix a feeling with a thought. Just got to feel it. And that was the interruption back then was, as we know, animals, once they've been through a dog fighting or ducks or whatever, they'll have a bit of a shake afterwards and knock it off. And in the way we've been trained through trauma, the human will actually shrink and fold rather than getting up and shaking it off, and that's a cumulative effect in the body because the body hasn't responded. It's been caught in the mind, and the body's just working like a vessel, like a library of unprocessed stuff, waiting for a safe place to be able to actually feel how deep it was. And sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, but we're inclined also to believe that worse is bad, when worse may be just the thawing process of starting to process all of that emotion, and the old loop of, oh, here I go again, I'm going into this or that, not actually happening at all, but creating a loop through the old understanding. So it takes a lot of consciousness to remain present and to not get caught in story as much as I still do at times, but it's time for me to tell my story. And with that, I think I might leave this here. I wish you all well. Take care. Ciao.